So we are still here, and we're looking forward to the State of the Nation address. The second, of course, State of Nation address. So far, the question is, what will the president speak to? What is he going to say? All right, and we're also looking at his scorecard. Of course, there are things he said in his first State of Nation address. He also spoke right after the Gen Z protest, and he was forced to do quite a number of things and make hard decisions. Also, right through it, we've seen the deputy president, or former deputy president, Rigathi Gachagua, impeached, and of course, a new deputy president now in sitting. And the question is, would the president then accept and acknowledge some of his challenges? We have heard him, of course, speak on a stabilized economy, and on the other day or another time say, we accept that it's not where we want it to be yet, and there's more to be done. So what then will he say in as far as the economy is concerned as well? But news just in, and of course, putting a lot more sport on the president is the Adani development. So far, what you're seeing is the Adani development. He has been indicted in the USA, of course, following fraud concerns, among other things. And of course, remember that the Kenya High Court had, of course, suspended the $736 million dollars deal between the state utility and India's Adani Energy Solutions to build and operate power infrastructure, including transmission lines. That is sometime in October. This particular information just coming up, of course, midnight here, 1 hour ago, thereabouts, in as far as updates are concerned. And the Adani Group chairman, Gautam Adani, has been charged in the U.S. of a massive bribery scheme. That is basically what's happening right now. And I'm right here with a very key and brilliant mind in as far as analysis is concerned. And before we hear from Javas Bigambo, the billionaire Indian industrialist Adani has been charged with paying hundreds of millions of dollars of bribes and hiding the payments from investors, and the U.S. prosecutors said on Wednesday. Now, let's start on that note. Javas Bigambo, political analyst. Thank you so much for creating time. It's quite chilly, it's quite cold. Traffic can be crazy when it rains or drizzles in Nairobi, but welcome to the broadcast.
Thank you so much, Anki, and I'm pleased to be here.
I do not know what you expect first as a Kenyan, as a political analyst. Maybe I'll start with the opening remarks, because I'd love your remarks on the Adani development. Because remember, this had caused an uproar. We had a whistleblower who had to leave the country. It got quite intense on social media as well. Kenyans were quite agitated about that JKIA deal with Adani before the courts declared themselves. So it's not an easy issue. But first, your opening remarks, and then please let's talk on this Adani issue, because we can't let it go.
Thank you so much, Anki, for the invitation to be here this morning on a very important day in Kenya's calendar, discussing critical issues of public interest, because we anticipate the president's remarks today. And President William Ruto's speech today to the joint parliament sitting is one of his very critical speeches this year. And by speaking to parliament, he is by extension speaking directly to the country, men and women. And by so doing, actually advancing the ideals of a democracy, because he will be genuflecting to the Constitution, particularly Article 132, Sub-Article 1, Part B and C, which falls within the ambit of the functions of the president to apprise Parliament on the state of the nation, particularly on how Kenya and under his administration, they are advancing the ideals contained in Article 10, Sub-Article 2 on values of good governance, and our obligations to the international community. And as a matter of fact, a couple of issues have come in. International relations issues, there are local or internal or domestic issues that the president needs to address himself to.
Right.
And Anki, with the obligation by the president to speak to the nation, there is also the corresponding obligation to be frank and engage these countrymen and women on issues of their concern. So today, I do anticipate that His Excellency President William Ruto will concern himself with how the state of affairs have been in terms of the economy in this country over the last 1 year. Remember that last year he also delivered the State of the Nation. And there will be some comparative issues as to what he said last time, what he's going to say today, and the consequential effect of all this. Remember as well, Anki, that the significance of this speech is that people follow line by line, paragraph by paragraph of this speech because of the consequential policy imperatives and proposals that he's going to make. He's going to make some policy proposals for the consideration of Parliament. Which policy proposals will affect how his administration responds to the daily needs of citizens, the legacy issues about his administration. But the other thing is that this time round, looking at how events have shaped President William Ruto, shaped his administration, shaped the politics of this country, I think that it is highly likely that President William Ruto may depart from a lecturing approach in his speech today, and he's likely to be more convivial. I expect him to extend a hand of brotherhood, friendship, and family, addressing citizens of Kenya as family members, as friends, than just speaking about issues.
If I may cut you short, because I really appreciate that you're giving us even more details as to what the Constitution, provides that he does, and you're talking about him coming out and departing from lecturing. But we have a matter in court, which I want us to talk about before we actually lose it. This Adani deal matter. I know it is still before the courts. Sometimes it's very difficult to go deeper into matters like this, but this particular picture that has now come right before the public, just at the wee hours of the night before the President's State of the Nation address. As a political analyst, what do you think this might do to what Kenyans have anticipated, to hear today? What would you expect then the President would do as the wisest and most prudent step? Would he speak to this matter? And what light do you think this has put the President in?
Anki, as a lawyer, the sub judice rule forbids me and stops me from speaking to the subject matter issues on a matter that is live in court. Right. Nonetheless, due, of course, reflecting on the public interest aspects of this Adani issue and the JKA, appreciating the import of the indictment from the US court on Adani and the bribery challenge, it has a connotative effect for someone to imagine that the business mogul could possibly have engaged in impropriety as well around the world and possibly even on the issues here. But beyond that also, it speaks to issues of public-private partnership in Kenya, right, and how they're supposed to be approached as a matter of public interest for public good. Remember that the issues that the President is to address today under Article 10, Sub-Article 2 of the Constitution, with respect to the implementation, there are issues to do with accountability. There's the issues to do with transparency on the part of leaders. Remember that the Constitution provides that everyone, including every leader, state officer, as the President, is bound by the perfunctory edicts of the Constitution. And so issues of transparency, accountability, are issues that the President needs to address himself to.
Are you speaking to Article 6 as well?
Well, leadership and integrity, that's Chapter 6.
Yes.
Leadership and integrity, but particularly the values of good governance, which are the pillars of the temple of leadership and governance in this country, in the Constitution, are issues that bind every citizen, every state officer, every public servant. And that's why it remains important that issues to do with public-private partnership are not scattered around, are not circumvented. They're issues that are dealt with all utmost frankness and authoritatively. The President, as he speaks to the nation today, he needs to speak ex cathedra on all these issues of public interest. The issues of public-private partnerships are issues of public interest that cannot be circumvented. However, with respect to the judicial mandate and territory, it may be very important for the President also to try and be shy in addressing critical issues that are live in court, lest he is indicted or actually blamed for trying to wade into a matter that a different arm of government, the judiciary for that matter, has got jurisdiction over and is not yet dispensed with.
However, he's been facing quite a number of challenges, I mean, with different arms of government, and the judiciary has been on top of it. And I appreciate that you mentioned that you're a lawyer, so that the viewer is well acquainted with that as well. And speaking, to that fact, just to bring us up to speed, since President William Ruto, or Kenya Kwanza for that matter, took over leadership, quite a number of issues have come before the courts. The Finance Act 2023, just the other day, got reprieve. But perhaps you could bring us up to speed, because as the president is speaking, Kenyans also need to understand what you're talking about, that he should perhaps be shy from speaking on. Which other cases could probably be active in court that have shaken the president's tenure in just 2 years?
Well, nearly everything is important.
All right.
And in fact, I would say that in the history of presidents in this country, no president has been constantly in the eye of the storm than President William Ruto since he took over office. Recall too that for the last 2 years, the president may have deliberately and consciously concerned himself with the issue of salvaging the economy from the doldrums that it was in.
All right.
Remember that when President William Ruto took office in 2022, September 13th, there were issues. The concern of Kenyans was the high cost of fuel,
right,
the high cost of
unga
or food,
yes,
etc. And you remember even the shilling was hitting through the clouds all the way to God's skies. And life was very difficult. And one may actually acquiesce with the president's approach to issues by focusing primarily on having an economic turnaround. And that's what I think has been the concentration. The issues of fertilizer, cost of fertilizer, the issue of cost of commodities across the shelves in the supermarkets, etc., and on the markets, the issue of the cost of fuel, all of which have now nosedived. And now, other things that the people of Kenya are concerned about are the firm commitments that the president made on the campaign trail, the economic agreements that he had with various counties and regions, and the implementation.
All right.
You remember issues to do with the Hustler Fund,
exactly,
issues to do with infrastructure development,
yes,
issues to do with the TVETs. All these things are very important. And possibly because of the economic situation that the country has been in, it may not have been quite judicious or prudent to start new projects when some old ones were unfinished, to remain white elephants or gray elephants, if you like, and then to also struggle just to implement projects, yet the economy itself was struggling. So I think that was the situation that the president found himself in.
I don't want us to go far beyond this new project idea that you've brought in. It's very, very key that we talk about it, because then there is the, political way to come in, the campaigning period, a very, very interesting manifesto, the bottom-up economic model, the young man's, narrative, the hustler, and there are projects that his predecessor had begun. Now, just when President William Ruto took over power, he was criticized for pretty much, continuing with what Uhuru had started. You remember those criticisms in 2023 that put him in a place where perhaps other political analysts would say pushed him to have to want to quickly turn around quite a number of things. We had the CBC looked at very fast. We had the university funding model. We have JSS now struggling right in between. After the task force said we're good to go, we have now the chief from NHIF, the housing levy. So when you say that he was moving too fast on this new project, do you think, as a political analyst, he was just but in a tough place to make or break?
I think it must be understood that we have never had Kibaki's projects. We have not had Uhuru Kenyatta's projects. We do not have William Ruto's projects. We have projects that are funded by the public. These are Kenyan projects. And the president is duty-bound, and any administration, successive administrations, to continue and complete projects that are public projects funded by the exchequer. That's just the common sense thing to do. And the other thing, for example, is to do with the housing projects. Former President Uhuru Kenyatta had housing projects. President William Ruto has taken on and continued or perpetuated housing projects, which still are part of the manifesto of the Kenya Kwanza administration. Then now, under his administration, you've got issues to do with the new social health framework.
Yes.
With the new laws. I can see through the dailies today, the call to public participation on the digital health framework, etc., so that we can get to have a new social health framework, because health is a very critical component. And when you look at, for example, the issue that remains in the transition process from National NHIF to Social Health Authority and the Social Health Insurance Fund, which actually focuses or is tethered to the level 2 and level 3 hospitals. Remember that these are the health facilities that are sub-county hospitals, that are clinics, that are dispensaries, where actually close to 80% of Kenyans in rural and peri-urban areas go for health services. And remember that also health is a devolved function as per the 4th schedule of the Constitution. And that's why the issue of the implementation of this new health framework also ropes in county governments, because it is not a question of delivery by the national government.
All right.
Remember, national government has got the national referral hospitals and the policy functions, but the implementation of the health function squarely falls on the shoulders of county governments. And that's why the implementation of this needs to work in conjunction with county governments in a very seamless way. As we look at all these things, and I'm sure that even the President's remarks today are going to have to focus on the issue of the transition and the social health framework, and how it is going to work and how it has to work. Admittedly, Anki, there are challenges.
All right.
I have known, by way of observation, by way of poetry, and by way of what we have observed as human beings, that to every rose there are thorns. There can never be existence of roses without thorns. And so the president needs to come alive and speak to Kenyans in a very convivial way, that while some policies are being implemented, there are some hiccups and challenges that are extant, and that the government, through policy implementation and various institutions, is continuing to do so much and everything else to ensure that policy implementation is smoothless for the amelioration of the lives of Kenyans. And that's why I said that today the president needs to speak to Kenyans in an approach of kind of a fireside chat, by being frank, real, and conversational in his approach.
And I appreciate that, because there's a voice, just if you look at your front page of one of the dailies, and in fact that is on Standard, has spoken to that, saying he expects that the president will be a little bit more open and acknowledge challenges if there is any. But I want to bring up a cartoon, to hear your analysis on, because you've spoken on the health matters. Because even as you're speaking, somebody made a joke, and it wasn't really a joke, really. In fact, I should withdraw that. They came to me and they said, do you realize that in certain areas in this country, especially at the grassroots, where you so speak about, the particular clinic or dispensary, if you like, is closed on weekends? Right? Because then that is pretty much what it is. Where do these people access their health services from? Which is a painful but true reality in some villages. And also, as you speak to this matter, we have the community health workers. And some would beg to ask this question: are we paying these people? How far is the government with the payment or the recognition of these community health workers? This was Ruto's, moment or idea. I remember in Kericho at that time when he unveiled these people. So the health sector goes way back, right when this particular administration began. As we continue, the cartoon will come up, but please speak to this matter.
Anki, you speak so well and you raise concerns about painful issues. In fact, tears are rolling to my chest and my heart concerning some of the challenges that my fellow citizens are facing all across the country, whether it's in Kasipul Kabondo, whether it's in Kilifi, whether it's in Busia, or even Lokichar. Let us remember that even as we talk about issues to do with the CHPs, when we talk about the issues of dispensaries, sub-county hospitals, and even health centers all across the country, we need to appreciate that when you look at the gamut of health services and the implementation, everything does not fall squarely on the shoulders of the national government. Health is a devolved function. I'm coming to that. Now look.
Yes.
When it comes to issues to do with dispensaries and whether they are working, even on weekends, Saturdays and Sundays, or public holidays. It is county governments that are responsible for level 2 and level 3 hospitals. It's not the national government. Secondly, I think we need to put the spotlight on county governors.
All right.
That actually when some health facilities are not working, when they are not having sufficient supply of drugs, it is the county governors and the CECs for health in county governments that are squarely responsible for delivery of health services at the county level. At the national level, we have got national referral hospitals, and then we have got the policy function and guidance for implementation by the national government. And so, today, while the CHV was generally a proposal, a policy proposal on health improvement by the candidate then and now President William Ruto, the implementation of these policies is not the function of the national government. It is squarely falls upon the shoulders of county governments because health is a devolved function.
Now, even if you follow closely the recent happenings, I want to play a bite earlier on by President William Ruto on this same matter, on matters health, and of course I will have you comment on that. But before I even go there, there is that concern that the county governments have alleged that in as far as what you're talking about is concerned, and I'm talking about the community health workers, they were not consulted. And to that extent, the blame should not fall on them. I'll come to that because the blame games as well would deteriorate development. Number two, there is then the concern on when you're talking about this squarely lands with the county governments, you do realize there's a looming shutdown at the county level right now. But allow me to come back to that after this bite. These are the words of President William Ruto in his first State of the Nation address in as far as health is concerned.
We have instituted radical reforms in the provision of healthcare services in Kenya, including the enactment of 4 new laws that will anchor the implementation of this bottom-up approach to healthcare. I am tremendously grateful to this House and honorable members for enacting the Primary Health Care Act, the new Social Health Insurance Act, the Digital Health Act, and the Facility Improvement Financing Act. These laws, honorable members, will usher in and guarantee a new era in the provision of healthcare, covering all essential services from preventive, promotive, curative, palliative, and rehabilitative services, guaranteeing every Kenyan access to comprehensive and quality healthcare.
All right, there you have it. It's talked about, preventive, promotion, and what the best word there, Wakili, is every Kenyan. Every Kenyan, all right? Some saying he's overambitious because if you look at what he said then and the amount of, complaints that are streaming in, and I know you've come across some, could be your relatives, is it really reaching every Kenyan, or are you of the sentiment that we should give the president time?
Well, time is always right to do what is right. And the Kenya Kwanza administration has got time in its hands to deliver on its mandate, which time spans within the period of 5 years of election cycle. Secondly, when it comes to policy implementation by way of legislation and by way of laws and by way of functionality of institutions does not function like popcorn making that just pops up within instances or a moment, or even instant coffee or water through a dispenser. It runs on the wheel, yes, of a period of time and functionality of institutions and other players, including stakeholders. We must appreciate, and I sit here conscious, that actually the implementation of some of these policies has had challenges and hiccups. It is important for the president, in his call today, to speak to institutions responsible for implementation of various aspects of policies to play their part dutifully. For county governments to play their role dutifully than, looking for opportunity for blaming. Because blame games is not what Kenyans want. When Kenyans are paying taxes, they are not doing that at times gladly. They are doing that grudgingly. And they expect government services to also come smoothly, just the same way some of these taxes are picked or taken from them by way of operation of law. And the implementation of the new social health policies is actually facing challenges, whether it is at the Nambale Sub-County Health Facility or any other health facility that is known. It is important that now, whether they are doctors, remember that doctors have also had a couple of issues they have complained about, the SHA and SHIF, they've complained about this.
Yes.
But we need to also to appreciate why have some of these players been complaining about this. CHVs, the CHPs, are they fully apprised of this health component? And we've seen that actually they have undergone various trainings and they're helping people in various villages and hamlets, and they're trying to deal with issues, whether it is hypertension issues, testing, the issues of diabetes, etc., and information at the local level. And I think, looking at it through the lenses of universal health coverage, it is important to appreciate that even through the Sustainable Development Goals prism, these things are to be achieved slowly within the period of time. When you look at Africa Agenda 2063, it is to be achieved, whether it's the health component, education component, between now to 2063. But Kenyans are expecting government services on a daily basis. And that is why the president today in his remarks may need to come true and frankly to Kenyans that there are these particular challenges that are manifested in the implementation of the new SHIF program under SHA, and that various institutions are now duty-bound to ensure that within a foreseeable period of time, which must be very soon, these challenges that are endemic right now to the implementation actually will be a thing of the past.
Now, I want to, yes.
And remember that, look, Anki, when you look at global history, for example, somebody like FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt of the US, there is no president that led a country through tumultuous times like him. One thing that he did was to appreciate the enormity of the challenges that the country is facing, internal and external, and call for public support and unity in appreciating that those challenges are not confronting the leadership alone, they are confronting the people as a whole. Today, the challenges being faced by Kenyans are not challenges that only fall upon the shoulders of the president and those that are elected in office, whether in government or opposition. These are challenges that are being faced by everyone, whether a teacher, whether a student, whether a farmer, or even those without employment.
All right.
And so, in so doing, the president today needs to appreciate all these challenges, including the education sector, whether it's the CBC, whether it is the universities like Moi University, that is struggling with various institutional management challenges. All these things must be faced.
We will move to the education sector shortly, but there's that cartoon on the screen. I want you to help me interpret it. There's a patient lying down. It looks to me like not a very, one of those illnesses you would speak of and say it's a slight one passing through. We're seeing there's a hand there, a shift hand, that is equally reaching out, or is it calling out for help as well? I wouldn't interpret this. I'm not in a position to... What do you think that cartoonist was trying to say there?
Well, I think I would say that the cartoonist has tried to paint a picture, just like Picasso did in his times, of the real situation of the health sector.
Okay.
From an institutional management perspective, which is SHIF, from the client perspective, which is the patient, from the health perspective of the institution, which are hospitals, and then from an overall governance framework. You see, it is Okot Pabitek who wrote a small book titled Artist the Ruler, and artists rule through such kind of imaginative positioning of issues that are facing society. I think what this artist has tried to ably demonstrate is that in terms of the management of the rollout of the new health framework that is SHIF, that maybe the framework could be having some challenges that need support in terms of making sure that the framework works and does not collapse. Because if it's a question of legislation, we have got laws in place, the 4 laws. Today, As I said in the dailies, we have got the call for public participation in the digital health regulations. If it's a question of management of health facilities,
yes,
and for the benefit of the patients by way of benefiting through SHIF, it is important for all players, led by government, all players, Anki, every player, citizen, legislators, doctors, county governments, to come together and make sure that all these challenges that are being faced are not challenges of a lifetime that must not be incessant. These things can and should be dealt with.
No, Akili, I know. I want to take a very short breather, but NHIF equally had its own challenges.
Sure.
It did have challenges.
Sure.
And there are questions of, could you not fine-tune NHIF? Number two, when this, of course, social health insurance fund or scheme came up, then we had the CS as Susan Nakumincha. The courts declared itself and said we need proper legislations. You've spoken to that. But there are questions of, are we working backwards, reverse? Is the president and his administration well conversant with the law? Because the back and forth, you have a good law, legislation or implementation, something was always missing. Are these things that could have been avoided? Or maybe a little less that is now seen right now, because as we're speaking, there are patients who actually died through this particular transition because they could not get, the medication they needed to. They got even worse than they should have been today. It is that serious.
Anke, I commiserate with families and friends of those who lost relatives in this period of transition of this new health architecture. And I bring myself to an appreciation that there are certain teething problems in its implementation. What we also need to appreciate that within the implementation of SHIF, there are those things that from the rollout have worked, are working, and a few that are facing some challenges. Now, it is significant to appreciate that some issues are working and some challenges are there. Even some have had challenges at some points of registration, and then after some time, they get resolved. I've had those kinds of reports.
All right.
We have also seen the number in droves of Kenyans that are successfully registering with the SHIF. And so we may need to appreciate the successes, and as we decry the challenges, we not just need to decry, but we also need to ensure that we are working to ensure that stakeholders and the persons or institutions behind the efficient management of the rollout are playing their part.
All right.
I want to pleasantly imagine that there are no efforts of sabotage.
Okay.
Now, you ask a question about whether the leadership of the country is conversant with laws. Let's face it, when it comes to the social contract, toward that social contract, the executive has got to make policy proposals which were contained in their campaign packages. It is the duty of the national legislature, parliament,
all right,
to make sure that they enact legislation that will make material those policy proposals. The moment parliament has enacted pieces of legislation, it is the duty of the executive through various institutions to roll out these policies as framed out within the laws of the country. And so there are very many players that have to be cognizant and conversant of issues of policies such as the SHIF policies in the country.
Indeed, we are looking at a joint special sitting today held in the National Assembly. In the regard that we are referring to today, the President William Ruto should be giving of course, the State of the Nation address, the second in the 13th Parliament since he took over office. But before we go even deeper into matters of education, we're looking at basic things. Food on the table, being able to access quality education, and all the way, 100% transition for that matter, accessing quality healthcare, things that President William Ruto himself said and promised Kenyans, not only in his campaign period or in his manifesto, but he reiterated and echoed this in his first State of the Nation address. But how far has he gone? We take a short breather. We continue this conversation after this break.